So I guess to start with, I think this discussion series already has, as Dana said, been looking at sort of the nature of the state, so you see it from a socialist perspective, and crime and policing and prisons are all part of that sort of that state and part of the way in which the ruling class rule, and a lot of the sort of criminal justice system is around maintaining that rule and around property, sort of in the context of a capitalist society. So I think you've discussed those things probably in quite a lot of detail already. So I'm going to sort of take that a bit as read, and just have a look at the questions which I've seen on the Eventbrite, which is about, do we need prisons? Should we abolish prisons now? Would that be a good idea? And sort of what does justice mean now in the society we're living in and in a socialist future? So I'm just going to try and cover those things and, put in some facts and figures that I've sort of found along the way. So first of all, the question of justice, I think, is tricky and probably means different things to different people. I think, our society as it is sort of unjust by its nature, because it's based on exploitation. It's based on people not having the freedom and liberty that, I think humanity should have. And that does, I think, have like a major impact into when you're talking about crime and about how people are living their lives. And I suppose what I would argue is that the current system, although it's sort of built on this idea that this is justice and this is just what justice looks like, it's not delivering justice, and this is just not good enough, really, for people. And we should be much more ambitious, and aim for a much more thorough justice, as a just society, rather than the sort of the punitive system that we have at present. And I think I'll probably come back to this maybe a bit more later on, because I think the way in which things are really unjust kind of becomes really apparent when you look at actually who is in prison, who are these people that are put in jail, and what are they doing there, and how does that help or not. So the other question is about abolishing prisons, and I think ultimately, we should, we would want a society where we don't have prisons as we know them now. They don't seem to be a useful thing, and they're not helping, I don't think, at all. But it would be extreme to say let's just abolish them tomorrow and just let everybody out. There'd be problems with that. So I think it's worth thinking about, what are prisons for? What is the purpose of them? Is there any way in which they're providing any sort of service to society? So I think the sort of commonplace view of these things that we see in the press is that prisons are about keeping people safe. The focus in the media very much is around violent crimes and protecting victims, and that prisons are part of a way to do this. But I think the reality is quite different. The idea of justice is, that people are autonomous, that they're responsible for their actions, and that if they cross certain lines and do certain things wrong, then they should be punished for that, and that gives some, some level of satisfaction, I suppose, to people that have been done wrong by. And I think there's a sort of underlying thing that, the people that are in prison, these criminals, are sort of evil and scary and quite different to normal people, and we need to be kept safe from them. So I think that's sort of what we're told and how we're sold this system in today's society. I think the idea of so these are just figures and things which may or may not relate to what I'm saying, but I think the idea that prison helps and that this form of justice helps, it doesn't sort of reverse what has been done. And I think when you hear people, sort of victims of crime speaking, even after sort of court sentences and things like that, often it's a real cliche, but people say it, and I think they probably say it because they mean it, is that actually, however long somebody's been sent to prison for, it cannot undo, if, particularly the media is often focusing on a particularly damaging crime, a violent crime or an abuse, and that it cannot undo what has been done. And I think, that's the case. So does it help in other ways? I think the other ways in which it might help is, which we're often told, is that it's some kind of deterrent. But it doesn't. So my thing at the bottom there is just, 44% of people reoffend within a year. It doesn't cure the problem. It doesn't stop the problem happening in the first place. And there's no sort of relationship between the number of people that are in jail in terms of the prison population and the sort of the crime rate. So sorry, this screen I've got up now is from the Prison Reform Report. Prison Reform Trust in 2019. So I've got some references at the end. I meant to share them at the beginning, but I'll do it in a minute. But a lot of the facts and figures that I've got are from the Prison Reform Trust, and these things are sort of coming from the Office of National Statistics, so they're not disputed anyway. But you can see, we've got quite a high prison population, and the graphs at the bottom are just sort of showing the complete lack of any sort of link that you can find between the prison population and the crime rate. And I think the often other quoted one is sort of in America, I think it's a long-term trend of them having a huge prison population and also a huge level of violent crime. So it doesn't help in that way. I think, there might be an argument in terms of containment, but there's a lot of other things that, you could do to address the problems that people face and the things that happen. So I think if we look at, what are the sorts of people that are actually in prisons, then I think it sort of illustrates that a lot of the people that are in prison are either they're there because there's been some sort of prejudice against them. A lot of them are people who are very poor, and people who are probably maybe struggling with things in some way. And there's, I think, all sorts of things you could see that actually might help people, the situation of people that find themselves in jail. So at the moment, there are 79,645 people in prison in the UK at the moment. That's a number that had generally been going up until the last sort of few years. And I guess the sort of the key point is that, 69% of the people in jail haven't committed any violent crime. So this idea of them all being really, terrifying, violent people is false. Most of the people in jail haven't physically hurt anybody. I think there's a lot of those could very often, be safely released tomorrow, in my opinion. And that's even more extreme when you look at women. There's only a very small number of women in prison compared to men, only 5%. But out of those, 89% have not committed any kind of violent crime. So in terms of containment, it's actually, and people's physical safety in society, there's only any kind of good argument for that for quite a minority of the people. You see more people, there's a lot of people in jail have got difficulties in mental health, difficulties in terms of drug addiction. And I think some of those are probably underreported. So the mental health is only sort of people that have actually sought treatment in the last year, and figures in terms of addiction, which I can't find there now, was people that had sort of reported that as being a problem. So, you know, it may be a lot higher than what it looks like. Yeah, so I think a lot of those people, it's just not doing them any good at all, being in prison, and it's not necessary. And things have, I guess, got worse in prison, you know, in the last sort of decade or so. I think we've seen things have changed in quite a dramatic way. The government have had this dual kind of position of wanting longer sentences, more people in jail, and at the same time trying to privatise things and have huge cuts in funding, which sort of resulted in the prison inspectorate, which is, you know, part of the state, having many, well, I think there were 7 that I saw listed, but there may well be more than that, prisons. So there was sort of urgent notifications issued, and they found they had to sort of start reversing some of the cuts in 2016 because, yeah, prisons were just sort of not functioning at all because they were so poorly staffed. So, yeah, I don't know. I think some of these things we may come back to in discussion. So, covered. Yeah, I think so. Now, another issue was one of the things that I was going to reference was this idea of, I think this issue, the idea of prisons, you can look at from lots and lots of different angles. And one of the things that we had actually as an article on our website is about the idea of the sort of incentives and privileges scheme. So, which an activist that we had talked to, Joe Black, was describing as slavery, because prisoners are actually sort of being put to work producing products not just to maintain the prisons, which I think is often the main work that people do in prisons, but also producing things that are then being sold in shops at very low prices. But in terms of monetary pay, you know, the average, this was a decade ago, but the average pay for prisoners was only £8 a week. And, you know, if they didn't want to work or had a problem with the way in which they were being made to work, then they could lose privileges like ability to have visitors or to go to training courses, you know, things that are really affecting their day-to-day life. So, yeah, I think, you know, what was our answer is that a lot of the crime and a lot of the way that crime is committed is very much bound up with the society that we live in multiple kind of different ways. I think you can unpick it in different ways. So there's some things that are crimes now, you know, and drugs is the obvious example that leads to lots and lots of things being sort of seen as crimes, and opportunities, I suppose, for people to be ending up in coercive situations with people, you know, because there's this sort of unregulated market that is there. So I think that impacts on crimes in a lot of different ways. And the lack of sort of opportunities that people have. So, yeah, one of the statistics that I had here was around, which I found really shocking, was the number of the sort of literacy level of people that are in prisons. So 62% had a reading age of 11 or lower, which compared to, like, in terms of the population, only 15% of the UK population would have that, of the adult population would have that difficulty in reading. And you know, these are all, I think, products of the society that we're in. So there's so many people who are not able to get the education that they need, not able to sort of participate in society in the way that they'd like to be able to participate in society, and have ended up sort of being criminalised and brought into the prison system, rather than perhaps receiving services such as, you know, education to help with housing, help with mental health, help with addiction problems that would enable a more cohesive society, I suppose. So yes, I think it's sort of, it just underpins things in lots of different ways. An example that I thought of was a woman I met who was in a refuge, and she had was there as a victim of crime, and her ex-partner had been caught on CCTV, you know, running after her with a gun, and she'd come into a refuge. And for her, I think, in terms of her partner being in jail, it wasn't that this was justice being served so much as just a sort of temporary containment. And her main sort of concern was to try and get herself rehoused and moved to a different area before he got released from jail. So, you know, you want a society where if that woman had had like the services and the opportunity and the financial means just to set up home in another town, then that would have just enabled her to be safe. So I think if you had a society where people are not as restricted as they are currently by their lack of financial freedom, then there'd be less opportunity for some crimes as well. Like if people were able to decide what they wanted to do, who to live with, where they would live, and, you know, then I think that would reduce a lot of the problems that we see in society today. Let me see if there's anything else I was gonna add. Just I suppose as well, you know, the impact that going to prison has on people is just absolutely huge. So what I have trying to find the picture. I think it's in this one. So the fact that, you know, 1 in 7 people are homeless when they're released from prison, only 17% are in paid employment where they're actually having pay-as-you-earn taxation a year after they're released. It's like destroying, you know, it's meaning that people are losing their homes, people are losing their jobs. A lot of prisoners even rack up debts while they're actually in prison and are not able to address that while they're in prison, and then have to face that when they come out. So it's just, you know, totally setting people up to fail, taking people away from their families, from their networks, and just having no freedom. So it's I think it's just a really huge measure to take somebody out of life and put them in this situation, and that should only, you know, people should only have any kind of containment where it's absolutely necessary for the safety of society. And that's a really small number of the people that we're doing that to at the moment. And I think, you know, going back to this idea of, you know, should you abolish prisons, I think you would want that containment to look very different. So not about punishment, it's about how can you support people, how can you enable people to live lives in a safe way.